Welcome to The Explainer. We're jumping right into a huge story that's breaking right now. We're talking about the brand new, just released sworn testimony of a billionaire and his relationship with one of the most infamous criminals in recent history. Okay, so here's the deal. Today, February 20th, 2026, literally just a few hours ago, House investigators dropped an absolute bombshell. It's the video deposition, long sealed by the way, of one of Jeffrey Epstein's closest and you could argue most powerful associates. And that person? It's Les Wexner. Yeah, the incredibly secretive billionaire who founded Victoria's Secret and L Brands. For the very first time, we get to see his sworn testimony about Jeffrey Epstein, and it is now completely public. You know, for years, there's been this one massive question hanging over the whole Epstein scandal. What did his main money guy, his primary benefactor, Les Wexner, actually know? Well, today, we finally get to hear Wexner's side of the story, straight from him. It's the question on everyone's mind, right? How does a titan of the retail world end up becoming the financial foundation for one of history's most notorious predators? So, let's do this. Using Wexner's own words from this deposition, we're going to trace their entire relationship from the very start to the bitter end.
So you'd think a relationship like this, with so much money and power involved, would kick off in some fancy boardroom, right? Nope. According to Wexner, the whole thing started with a completely random chance encounter down in Florida.
And when I say random, I mean random. Wexner describes their first meeting, which he places around 1986, as just so unbelievably normal. It wasn't some big introduction. It was just this brief, almost forgettable moment in the back of a car. But wow, that one little moment, it ended up kicking off a relationship that would last for decades. So this really lays out the whole timeline for us. It starts super casually back in the 80s. Then, just a few years later, by 89 or 90, it solidifies into this relationship of total financial control. And then, boom, it all comes crashing down around 2007, right in the middle of criminal allegations and the discovery of massive theft.
Okay, so how does that even happen? How do you go from a guy I met in a car once to basically having a blank check? Well, the deposition really starts to pull back the curtain on how Epstein pretty quickly got this incredible, unprecedented control over Wexner's entire fortune.
Epstein's official title, according to Wexner himself, was Family Office Manager. And what does that mean? It means he wasn't just some financial advisor. No, he was the guy handling investments, making sure taxes were done. Wexner literally said he handled all that stuff in his personal life. This freed Wexner up to focus on building his massive global empire.
And this is where things get really interesting, because Wexner claims it was just a professional relationship, right? He says, I didn't see him as a friend, that they never went to lunch or dinner. But the reality painted by the evidence, it looks different. I mean, you don't give someone who's just a business associate the keys to the entire kingdom. We're talking trustee for his foundations, trustee for a dozen of his personal trusts, control of his New York City mansion. He even made him co-president of a huge development company. So what was the result of all that trust? Well, according to Wexner's own lawyers, Epstein stole hundreds of millions of dollars, a truly staggering amount. And get this, that stolen money seems to account for pretty much all of Epstein's wealth. So this wasn't just some personal betrayal. It was literally the money that funded Epstein's entire criminal operation. And you have to hear this. When the investigators showed Wexner exactly how Epstein was siphoning money from his charitable foundations, Wexner's reaction was just pure shock. He was appalled. He says he never, ever heard that. And this becomes a real theme throughout his testimony, this repeated professed disbelief. Now, you'd think something this big would have warning signs, right? And according to Wexner's own testimony, even before the whole scandal blew up, there were definitely moments that, well, in hindsight, they look like gigantic red flags. So the depositions points to several of these red flags over the years. I mean, as early as 1993, he was alerted that Epstein was running around falsely claiming to be a scout for Victoria's Secret. Then, fast forward to 2006, his own chief of staff tells him Epstein's being sued for being aggressive with a woman. And when Wexner confronted him, Epstein's excuse was, I was being shaken down by a hooker. And Wexner's response under oath, it was simply, I believed him. So what finally ended it? According to Wexner, it was a 1-2 punch. First, Epstein is facing a criminal investigation. And second, Wexner's wife discovers the massive theft. It was that combination,
the legal trouble, and the financial betrayal that finally, after 2 decades, severed the ties for good. And Wexner is absolutely adamant about this part. He says once he knew how bad it was, that was it. All contact stopped. Immediately. Forever. There was no slow breakup, no gray area. In his own words, Epstein was dead to me. And that really brings us to the absolute core of Wexner's defense here. It's this central theme running through this whole deposition, that he was an enabler. No, he was simply the biggest victim of a master con artist. I mean, this is his whole argument in a nutshell. He claims he was duped by, and I'm quoting here, the world Olympic all-time con artist. He says he was completely blind. In his version of events, the deception was so perfect, so complete, that he never saw a single sign of who Epstein really was. And he says this over and over again to the investigators. He says he's asked himself again and again why he didn't see it. He insists there should have been a clue, but there was nothing. He can't recall a single thing, not even a clue of a clue, he says, despite a relationship that spanned decades and was deeply, deeply intertwined with his life. So after all of this, after decades of trust and hundreds of millions of dollars stolen, Wexner is left asking himself how he could have missed all the signs. But I think the bigger question, the one this testimony leaves hanging in the air, is could he have? Was he really the victim of a perfect con, or was there an element of choosing not to see what was right in front of him? And that's the unsettling question this deposition leaves for all of us to grapple with.